Good morning. I'm Dr. R. Michael Fisher in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'm pleased this morning to be receiving the award, the Tilmati Fearism Award um, from Nepal, with the founding of Desh Suba and his colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Nupain, as well as Director of the Fearism Study Center, and many others who've contributed and are now contributing to Fearism studies. My own biography as someone who's been very interested in fear and fearlessness since 1989, which was a time when the world was in great crises, but also great hope of possibilities with the fall of the Russian Empire, the breakdown of the wall between East Germany and West Germany, and many other good things that I thought were very exciting. And for me, the birth of a vision in search of fearlessness was just a time of my life that gave me purpose beyond anything I had known before. I think I could call it a soul purpose and mission. And although I have a very spiritual background myself, not that I was raised in any religion, but became early in my 20s and even my teenage years very spiritually interested in the role of nature and indigenous cultures, very interested in how humanity was going to overcome its greatest deficits, its character flaws, its pathologies. And that began an arc of professions. So in this short video, I will share a little of my biography, and then I want to talk a little bit about the role of mothers and the womb in the experience of fear. So my first career, even though I was very engaged in naturalist studies, and I was also a natural artist, as was my brother, Gary Fisher, I was quick to go to college, and not that I enjoyed school in primary grades, I did not, or high school. But I did like biology, so I went to a technical school, the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in Edmonton, Alberta, and studied biological sciences, technologies, and I studied wildlife and ecology in my option in my second year for that diploma, and then worked in the field as an environmental consultant. Lots of things I learned in that field, lots of studies in the environment and the condition of the planet from an environmental point of view. And I knew that humanity was in great crisis coming soon. I think now in the year 2019, which is many years after I was in school, 1972 to 1974, a lot has come true that was predicted back then. I was always concerned that humans were a species that were polluting its own nest. And I think fear over the years has become one of the major pollutants of the mind, the soul, the interior. And then that has moved into our social life, and a fear-based social life, and a fear-based spiritual life, if even people consider themselves spiritual or not. So that began my investigations as a scholar. And I then went to education and got an education Bachelor of Education degree. I also got a Bachelor of Science degree in environmental biology. Very interested in evolution itself and the theories of evolution and systems theory and how that affects living systems relating to the environment. So really, I think that leads to a lot of my ideas of what is an ecology of fear. So the notion of fearism to me is a very broad notion that Desh Suba has defined. And others are now defining in their own way, adding to it, critiquing it. And I have moved really to a notion of an ecology of fear that interests me a lot, which is the foundation of that interplay between life and between fear. And I sometimes will specialize that in a study called fearology. And that's probably what I'm becoming most known for around the world. My next career was taking that education background, that science background that I had, and putting it into the field of rehabilitation and counseling. And I did a graduate diploma degree at the University of Calgary. Just a one-year diploma. I was thinking of doing a master's degree, but did not finish that. And that's where I worked with young people in distress with their families in training institutions and in a care facility. And I was the program manager, therapist, manager, and I worked directly with the boys, teenage boys who had been kicked out of school, kicked out of society. And my job was to help them heal. And I was very much already using ideas about how to master fear and become a master of your own life. So that started more and more my growth and personal growth and development. But at that same time, I was also involved in a conscious community. I was living not in communally per se, but we all lived very close. And this was a community led by a very charismatic leader. And we were looking at liberation. And we were looking at how to do peer counseling with each other, where humans support humans to go through their distress, go through their fears, get support, and heal through with our natural healing mechanisms. That led to a lot of changes in myself, as well as getting married and having two daughters and having a marriage that did not work out, and it became very much a learning experience for me. So I would say I've always been someone who's known how to learn. So my next two degrees were in education, a master's in adult education from the University of British Columbia, and a PhD in curriculum and instruction design from the University of British Columbia. And that's really why right now I'm very interested, and have been for a long time, I guess, in the design of how we are going to do fear education. That's another word that I've really promoted, or sometimes called fear management education. And that can be a field, and ought to be a field, as important as sexuality and teaching about sexuality. I like to say we ought to be teaching about fearuality. So those are some of my biographic highlights. I won't say too much more. When I met Desh Suba in 2014, thanks to his reaching out, we eventually in 2016 wrote this book. And it was our bringing together our two ideas, because we came to this idea of fearism independently at first, with slightly different variations in what fearism meant. And then we joined ideas, as well as me keeping some of my own, him keeping some of his, my philosophy, more of philosophy of fearlessness. But obviously I adopted the philosophy of fearism as kind of an east-west link between the two. I want to read from the dedication of that book, because Desh Suba in the dedication wrote, "My dearest mom, late mom, Tilmati Limbu, who showed me this beautiful world and enabled me to teach its heights, reach its heights. I miss you very much, Desh Suba." My dedication to this book, the educators of every stripe who fight for what they believe is right and critique their own beliefs with good philosophy. So in the last part of this short video, very short, I want to suggest that mothers, as Tilmati was for Desh Suba, a great inspiration. My own mother, it was born in Belgium, in Europe, and she was very different. She was not an inspiration for me at all. She was a very wounded woman. Came out of, her parents, World War I, Europe was devastated. Her country was devastated. And in World War II was even worse, because the Nazis invaded Belgium, Germany, etc. And Belgium was very torn with, these Nazi troops. My mother was a teenager at that time and was definitely traumatized by that invasion. So when she met my dad in the war, my dad was a Canadian soldier. She came to Canada, grade 8 education, did not speak English. So I am born and raised within this immigrant mother, and my father was an immigrant, but he had been here one generation. He's from Russia and then through Germany. That's where I got the Fisher name. But my mother really was not an inspiration to me as a child. I found her very emotionally distressed and fearful, to the point of paranoid a lot. Even though she had some beautiful qualities, I didn't really gain much from her. And it's taken me a long time to realize that I know when I was born in the womb, from the womb, I did a lot of art therapy in those early days of my 20s. I seemed to have this drive to want to know what had conditioned my mind, what had brought about a fear-based mind in myself, where my vulnerabilities were. And I know in art therapy, and talking to my mom later, that I know she was not the best mom. She drank alcohol and smoked cigarettes. And I was impacted, I know, by that in the womb, as well as by her fear, distress, being an immigrant, uneducated in New Canada, and was not treated well often by the Canadian people. There was racism, ethnocentrism, prejudice toward her that hurt her very much. Never mind, all the hurts and trauma she was carrying collectively from Europe. So I am born and I am a child of that European history of the traumatic. Sad as that is, that also was a time of switching and coming into the postmodern era. And this is what I feel I am a thinker of the postmodern. I am not a thinker of the modern world of enlightenment and thinking that everything is going to be wonderful and all we have to do is be reasonable and rational. I think this is the gift I got from my mother, is that in being born into such harsh circumstances and fear that was in her, that became part of my body and my soul journey, was to move from fear to fearlessness. I didn't know it at the time, but I think that has been, and that's why I'm so dedicated to fear. I recently received a letter from Vedara Shankara, and he is looking at my work and fearism right now, talking with Desh Suba and others. He's part of the Vedic tradition and has a research institute that wants to do some collaborative work with us. And he wrote to me, Dr. Fisher, I'm very happy and proud about your work. You were born in this earth for making fearless to bring to this universe. Your parents, really great, because while I was in the womb, they taught me some things very important. And now you explore this and bring it to the universe. So this is, Vida is someone who does not really know me at all. He's just first looked at my work and he already had this insight about me. And I think why I liked it, he was really talking about my mother and the womb. And, my father certainly was a guide, but not an intellectual guide. He was just a gentle man. So as I end this video, I want to say that, yes, fear comes from the generations. It comes from the womb. I want to say that unlike Desh Suba's mom, who is very inspirational and encouraging to his higher education and his pursuit of philosophy and poetry and all the things that Desh does so well in facilitating and guiding people and now spreading fearism around the world, he was inspired by his mom. I was not inspired by his mom. So it makes me ask, so what gift my mom gave was that she brought the horrors and the terrors, the fear of Europe, World War I, World War II, and brought that in her womb, in her own state of her injury, her fears. And I absorbed those. And then I had to learn in this life, my soul journey, if you will, my karma, if you will, is to recover and lead the world back to, in the best ways I can, fearlessness, on the way to fearless. So thank you very much for this award once again. I trust that the next year will be one very productive for fearism, the philosophy of fearism, and advancing this beyond the pollution that fear has brought to this planet, and that we will see fear also in its good side and its effective side, because in my view, my dictum from my work of 30 years research is, when fear arises, so then does fearlessness. Let's look for the fearlessness, not always looking for the symptoms of fear. Thank you very much for the award. Thank you very much for listening today. Bye now.